Hi everyone. Who have we got watching us today? Just give me a comment as per usual that you can see us, hear us, everything's working all right, and then we can get going. We've got 5 people watching. There's such a lag on it, it tells me, but it doesn't tell me who yet, so I'm like, ooh, it's a mystery. Jenny, Danielle, Paige. Can one of you just give me a comment, please? Ooh, we've got 11 people. Brilliant. Thank you, Hayley. So hello everyone. Today we've got a live talk with Joanna Helcke from Fit Bump Box. She's going to talk to you about fitness in pregnancy, covering all the usual frequently asked questions that she get asked. If you've got any questions, please just pop them in the comments as usual. She'll be happy to answer them as we go along. So don't be shy in asking anything. I'm sure I'll have a few as well because I need to get back to my pre-pregnancy body. So yeah, please do join in, interact. But yeah, over to you, Jo. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jason. Thanks for having me here. Yeah, so Jade said, please do interrupt as we go along, and any questions that pop into your head, you can guarantee that the answers will be of use to other people as well, so go for it. So I had a little bit of a brainstorm this morning about the kind of questions that I guess asked a lot. So I teach face-to-face, but I also do online stuff. And there are some questions that just keep coming back. And I thought I would go through those and then wait to hear from you if you've got any ideas that pop into your head. So one of the first things I get asked is, can I carry on exercising in the same way as I did pre-pregnancy? So most of us will hit our pregnancy and will have had our pre-pregnancy fitness regime, whatever it is, whether it be long distance running, whether it be team sports such as netball, hockey, it might be things like body pump at the gym, and you're ticking along and everything's fine, and then you fall pregnant, and then you're immediately wondering, well, is it okay? Is it safe for me to carry on doing exercises? And so basically, in your first trimester, as long as, well, a lot of people don't realize that they're pregnant for a while. So, you probably did carry on with what you were doing pre-pregnancy anyway. And you can do that. So basically, the rule of thumb is that in the first trimester, as long as you have been exercising consistently pre-pregnancy with whatever it is, whether it be jogging, whether it be weight training, whatever, you can carry on doing that as long as everything is going fine in that pregnancy. So an example, a contraindication would be if you were getting spotting, that blood loss, then you absolutely don't. But basically, if everything's ticking along fine, you can just keep going. And that even would apply to things like contact sports. But then it changes once your uterus starts to grow out of the pelvis. So the pelvis, being bony, is a bit like a protective casing around you. It's your protective shell. But the moment your bump starts to show and it's grown out of the pelvis, then you have to start to think about, okay, well, what kind of sports might cause a knock against me? And you drop those. So a classic example would be something like hockey, yeah? Also skiing. And I'm never popular when I say this because this is horse riding country, but I would say that horse riding, not because you're not a safe horse rider, but because horses can get spooked, and if you fall off when your bump is showing, that could be really problematic. Horse riders never love me for saying that. So things like running, because I get asked that a lot, and I have a lot of runners. Yes, as long as you're feeling fine, as long as everything's going on okay, you can carry on running. So that's your first trimester. Second trimester, I wouldn't really go for it. In other words, I wouldn't be kind of pushing for a personal best. If you do realize that you're pregnant in the first trimester, and say, I don't know, you were like running a marathon, I'm not saying don't carry on doing that. I'm just saying don't try and get your personal best in it, okay? You don't want to overtrain. You don't want to get too hot. That's one thing to be aware of. You don't want to, your body can regulate the body temperature for you, but it can't regulate it for your baby, for the fetus. And an overly hot fetus is not going to do any good for development. Okay, so that's just one thing to bear in mind. Once you get into the second trimester and your bump will start to show, that's when you have to have a little think about how things need to be altered. So let's take running. Running, yes, you could carry on with that. Why not? As long as everything feels fine, as long as you're recovering really well, as long as you actually still feel like running, then you can do, again, you can carry on, but making sure that you don't get overly hot, overly breathless. You want to be able to chat whilst you're exercising. That's a nice sociable way of making sure that you're exercising at the right level. Weight training, again, there's not a huge amount that you need to, if you've been consistently weight training, you can carry on into your second and even your third trimester. But there are things like, for example, lying on your back. You wouldn't be doing a bench press lying on your back. You'd have to tilt the bench. So this is basically, as a baby gets bigger, you get pressure on a vein, and this reduces venous return, and it can make you feel dizzy. And some people say that it could potentially reduce the oxygen levels to your baby. I would just be careful about lying on your back, where you know, even in something like Pilates or yoga or legs, bums and tums. Now, talking of legs, bums, tums makes me think about abs exercises. So in the first trimester, yes, you can carry on with normal abdominal exercise. That's fine. But once your bump starts to show, you know, you have to consider what is it that your body needs to do for the rest of the pregnancy. And one answer is that on the abdominal front, the abdominals have to stretch and they have to lengthen. And part of that process is also that they will weaken because they're being stretched so much. So if you went off in your second and third trimester and tried to carry on doing normal abdominal exercises like, you know, your sit-ups, your crunches, your V-sits, all that kind of stuff, it's actually kind of pointless. It's counterproductive because you're trying to fight something that your body has to do. It has to stretch and lengthen through the abdominal area. So you ditch all of your normal abdominal exercise, the typical crunches, sit-ups, planks as well, and you replace it with pregnancy-specific and pregnancy-friendly abdominal work, which is working that deep core level in a very gentle way. A classic example is, you know, when you go on all fours and you do opposite arm, opposite leg extensions, that's a typical sort of gentle core exercise, but there are like masses of them, you know, that you can do. So that would be one thing that you need to change as well in the second trimester. And obviously you ditch also all the contact sports because you do not want to get a knock, basically, in a vulnerable area. So another question that I get asked really frequently is basically, is there a time in your pregnancy when you have to shift over, when you actually have to shift over to pregnancy exercise, or can you continue basically with, say, your weekly running all the way through till the end? And this is where your judgment comes in, because it's going to be very individual. I can't say to you that at week 26 of pregnancy, you should stop running, because your body is different. You came to your pregnancy with different fitness levels, a different fitness regime. Your pregnancy will be different from everyone else's as well. So you have to be the judge of that. So whatever the exercise is that was pre-pregnancy that you've carried on doing, you have to make that judgment every week when you come to that exercise and go, how do I feel about it? Do I feel comfortable when I'm doing that exercise? So an example would be anything bouncy. If you're doing something really bouncy and your bump is, you know, bouncing up and down and it feels really uncomfortable, then, well, you could do one of two things. You could knock it on the head and no longer do anything bouncy. So jogging, take it to walking, for example. Some people buy a support belt, and that can prolong the time that they can run, the length of time they can run at pregnancy-wise. I don't know if you know Fitter Mama. They are a clothing brand, and they have like an integrated, they're a fitness clothing brand, by the way, and they have like an integrated support system for your bump to help lengthen the length of time that you can run for in pregnancy. So that's one consideration. But another consideration is just simply do you feel like running, or do you feel like weight training? And, you know, if you're coming to those workouts and you're really having to force yourself, you're having to drag yourself to that start line, you know what? Listen to it. That's your body going, please, can we stop now? Please, could we do something a little bit more gentle? And don't try and override that. Okay, I'm a big believer in following that internal gut instinct and not overriding it.
So I do have a question for you.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Somebody's asked, what if I didn't exercise before but want to now? I'm guessing because you naturally gain weight during pregnancy and you might want to prevent that.
Yes. So I've only spoken about those of you who are coming to pregnancy and have had fitness beforehand, but you're quite right. Lots of us come to pregnancy and we didn't exercise at all pre-pregnancy. So the answer to that question is, you do not take up a new form of fitness in your first trimester, okay? Because in the first trimester, there's so much going on with your body. Although nobody can see that you're pregnant, the very foundations of pregnancy are being laid down. So what I would say is, in the first trimester, I'm happy for you to walk. You can do power walking, that's fine, because it's a normal functional part of our daily lives. It's not something new. And then when you get to the second trimester, you can start to bring in, because in the second trimester, when you've had your scan, you know, we're kind of going, okay, things are safer, you know, and you got to bring in pregnancy-specific exercise. In other words, exercise that is delivered, that's tailored specifically for pregnancy, and that is delivered to you by somebody like me or anyone else who's a specialist in that field, okay? Because they'll make sure it's tailored for you. So you're talking about, it could, I mean, honestly, it doesn't have to be limited to pregnancy yoga and pregnancy Pilates. I know everyone kind of congregates around that, but there's loads of, there's aquanatal, there's, I mean, I actually run a HIIT class that's actually a pregnancy specific. It's not what I would, if you came to me and you'd never done any exercise before, it's not the one I would direct you towards, you know, but nevertheless, it is tailored for pregnancy. So that's your pathway. First trimester, walking, doing normal functional stuff. Second trimester, make sure you do, and third, obviously onwards, make sure you do exercise that's been tailored for pregnancy.
So there's different exercises per trimester, basically, not one set throughout the whole 3 different trimesters.
No. So you could. I mean, I do think that people need to follow what they enjoy. So, I'll give you an example. A lot of people are told to go and do aquanatal, and aquanatal you can do right the way through your pregnancy. And in fact, you can do it until beyond your due date if you go overdue, and that's absolutely fine. But, you know, some people just basically hate getting into cold water in winter. You know, I can kind of empathize with that. So they could do like pregnancy yoga or pregnancy Pilates all the way through, right the way till the end. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you.
No, that's fine. So basically when you decide to shift over, because there will come a point, by the way, even if you were like, a real gym bunny pre-pregnancy, there will probably come a point in your pregnancy where you sort of think, you know what, I've now had enough of running, or I've had enough of, my weight training, I'm tired, and I want to do something that really is tailored for pregnancy. The other thing is that it's a really, really nice way to meet other mums-to-be who are in that same stage of life as you. And I can't emphasize the value of doing pregnancy exercise specifically so that you meet a really nice network of mums-to-be that are going to help you through the tough times postnatally. I just like me, there's more value in that than in the actual exercise, literally, because we're talking about people's mental well-being. It's huge. But yeah, there'll come that point where your body's telling you it's had enough of whatever you were doing, and then just do your homework. Make sure you go to someone who is a specialist in that field. Yeah, I think that's important, because they'll know how to cater for specific conditions like carpal tunnel syndrome, like feeling faint when you go up and down, because that's quite common to feel quite dizzy in pregnancy, pelvic girdle pain, abdominal separation, stuff like that. So I have touched on various types of exercise, but I do get asked, is there a best type of exercise for pregnancy? And I mean, I've been doing this for about 12 years now, and, you know, maybe wind back 10 years ago, and I'd have said, oh, yes, you know, you should do pregnancy Pilates for this reason and that reason and the other reason. And I mean, yes, I teach pregnancy Pilates, and Pilates has a role to play, as does pregnancy yoga, for example, as does aquanator. But, you know, with 12 years experience under my belt, now I would say that I'm more open, and I would say that, you know what, we all have our preferences, and our preferences are really important, because we're not going to stick to a form of exercise if we absolutely loathe it. You know, I mean, with the best will in the world, if somebody made me do something that I absolutely hated, the likelihood is I would cop out every week and go, yeah, you know what, I think I'll just watch a TV program instead, or stay at home. So whilst certain all different forms of pregnancy exercise have sort of their uses. So, for example, pregnancy Pilates is really good for your deep core stability, which is important and can help protect against back pain. Pregnancy yoga, they do a lot of breathing to help with birth. So again, really valuable. Aquanatal gives you a really gentle, safe way of doing cardio and resistance without putting any pressure on your joints. So they all have different sort of values within them, but ultimately you also have to do what you enjoy. I really do believe that.
There's another question.
Yeah.
Can I harm my baby if I do it wrong? So I guess that just means any exercise, is it always safe, or?
Well, no, it's not always safe. So as I said earlier on, if you were, for example, say you did pre-pregnancy, your thing was high intensity interval training and circuit training and boxercise and stuff like that, yeah? And then if you didn't modify that in your pregnancy, and you were going like absolutely at 100 miles an hour, putting in kind of like 95% effort in those workouts and getting really, really hot and sweaty, that's potentially, I'm not saying it's going to harm you or your baby, but it's potentially unhelpful, and I wouldn't advise it. You can moderate it and modify it and find alternatives for some of the exercises and make it more gentle, to make it more suitable for pregnancy. Obviously, dangerous sports, there are some, like, you're not going to go scuba diving. You will harm yourself and your baby. You're not going to go rock climbing. I mean, this is common sense. Skiing, again, you might go, well, I'm an amazing skier, but as we know, you'll be surrounded by a whole bunch of people on the ski piece that are not amazing skiers, and they could bump into you. So it's that kind of logic, really.
So it's just being sensible, basically.
Yeah, certainly with some stuff it is being sensible, yeah. And as I say, certain things like lying on your back. If you lie on your back for for quite a long time in an exercise, your body will probably start to tell you. I mean, you shouldn't. I don't advise it. I wouldn't do it. Okay, that's why I said you incline your bench. But if you were to do it, your body's going to start to tell you it's not okay, because you're going to start to feel funny and faint. Yeah, so your body's sort of safety mechanism going on there. Any more questions or?
Not just yet. Okay. I have got one, but that's for after pregnancy, so I'll wait for you to get to there and then I'll ask you.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know if any of you have got pelvic girdle pain. If you have, fire away. Instead of covering it, I'm going to let you send a question over to Jade about it, okay? Because it is a very specific condition, but it can be horrific, and I give you lots of advice and point you in directions for advice as well. And it does definitely affect how you would and wouldn't exercise. What else? Okay, now one of the things I find I get a lot is, I'm sure you're all on Instagram, and you following celebrities who are pregnant, and you kind of look at their workouts. Some of the celebs who are into their fitness will be showing you their personal workouts that they're doing during pregnancy. And so these workouts are, really, really tough. They'll be doing burpees and jumpy stuff and high knee runs, all sorts of, quite intense stuff. And the effect of that is that it can leave a lot of people thinking, well, hang on a sec, does that mean that I should be doing that, or I can be doing that? Does that mean it's safe? What does it mean for me? Because you'll all have heard that when you exercise in pregnancy, it should be, and this is a key word, it should be moderate. Okay, and I think there's a lot of confusion around the word moderate. Okay, so moderate is your moderate. It's not your friend's moderate. It's not the celebrity's moderate. It's your specific moderate. And I think as long as you bear that in mind, then you can figure out quite easily what exercise intensity you can work at. Okay, so if you come to, one of you said, well, hang on a sec, what about if I come to pregnancy and I've never exercised before, I wasn't really doing anything? Yeah, your moderate is going to be really different from somebody else who was going to the gym 4 or 5 times a week. Okay, so that's where you are the best judge. None of us can judge. Use the kind of can I chat through exercise as a test, and you can be sure that the person who comes to pregnancy having not really done anything much will immediately start to feel breathless much sooner than maybe their neighbor who was doing circuit training 4 times a week. Yeah, so as long as you just ignore, at least don't ignore what's going on around you. You know, it's fun to see what the celebs are doing, but just bear in mind that that's probably their moderate. In other words, you know, they were probably doing 2 hours of exercise a day, every day, 7 days a week, you know, so they're going to be really, really fit. And that's why it's probably safe for them to do that, hopefully. Okay, ab separation. Have any of you can give Jade a bit of a shout out. Have any of you heard about abdominal separation? Does that ring a bell or not?
Certainly to me, so.
Does it not to you?
No.
Okay, right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about abdominal separation, but I don't want it to leave any of you feeling kind of like worried about it, because abdominal separation, I'm glad actually Jade hasn't even heard of it, so there we are. That's a good thing. She's not stressed about it. So basically, as your pregnancy progresses, we discussed earlier on that your bump has to get bigger, and so the muscles have to stretch and lengthen, and they're going to weaken. So you probably can't see me very well. Can you see my ab area now?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So if you can imagine, with abdominal separation, the outer layer of abs, so that's like your rectus, which is your six-pack. Your six-pack separates out, like, can you see my zip opening up there? Yeah? Can you see there's a gap? And it's separate. The 2 layers separate out that way. And that means that you get this kind of channel, this gap down there, kind of from your sternum down to your pubic bone, in that direction. And the gap, basically, it's just, don't worry. The reason I say don't worry is because we have 4 layers of muscle wrapping around our abdominal area. It is only the top layer that separates out. And it's a natural process. It happens to 60 to 70% of women in pregnancy. And it simply happens because the bump has to go somewhere. Now, this might ring a bell with some of you. So I'm going to give you some examples, and you might now discover that you have got abdominal separation or you've had it. Okay, so when you're sitting on a very, very low sofa in pregnancy, it's a bit low, it's a bit squishy, and then you've got to get out of that sofa, and it's a little bit of a struggle because it's low and squishy. And you notice that your abdominals pop up into a weird, funny, like pointy shape. Does that ring a bell? Or getting out of bed. So you're pregnant, and you get out of bed, and instead of remembering to roll onto your side, you do a kind of like sit-uppy move, yeah, to get out of bed. And then you kind of look down at your stomach, and instead of being a nice round bump, it's a weird kind of pointy shape like that. Or out of the bath, that's another one. So you'll be lying back in the bath, and time to get out, and you notice that your abs pop up into kind of like a bit of a coney, inverted V shape. Does that ring a bell to any of you? If it does ring a bell, what that is telling you that that outer layer of the six-pack has separated out that way. Yeah, so it's opened up just to allow space. So it happens people ask me why do some people get it and other people don't. Most people get it to varying degrees, but then you've got things like, for example, how tall you are. Yeah, so obviously somebody who's super tall, I once had someone in my classes, and she was in the England basketball team. She was like really, really tall, and she didn't get abdominal separation because she had loads of space for her bump. In fact, I think she only looked pregnant when she was about 8 months pregnant because there was just like so much space. But if you're a really, really tiny person and you're left and you've got a big baby, and your bump has to go somewhere, so it goes outwards, and so the abs open up. Other reasons are genetic. So if you're more prone to, for example, getting stretch marks, if you got them when you grew in teenage years, then you might be more likely to get abdominal separation. Also things like age. As we get older, our collagen levels, they drop, and so our skin becomes less stretchy, and the abdominals can separate. But that's another one, by the way, for stretch marks. And so there are all sorts of, for example, if you're carrying twins, if you've had multiple births. So, for example, if you have a baby and then you're pregnant 10 months later, and then again 10 months later, all of that is a big strain on the area, so you're more likely to get abdominal separation happen. So what I would say is, if has it rung a bell with anyone or not?
Yeah, Danielle's commented saying she's heard about it.
Okay, she's heard about it, but she's not sort of seen it happen yet.
Nobody's commented to say that.
Okay, yeah, no, well that's good. What I was going to say is, if you do start to see that, if you see that like pointy shape where your basically your abs, your bump goes any point rather than being nice and round, when you do certain movements, just avoid doing those movements. Okay, so an example would be, well, I'm not keen on people sitting on squishy sofas anyway, because it tends to give lower back pain in pregnancy and postnatally. So if you can sit on something higher and harder, it will protect your lower back, by the way. But if you were sitting on a squishy sofa, use your hands to lift yourself up out of the sofa rather than using your abdominals. When you're getting out of the bath, use your arms to lift yourself up. When you're getting out of bed, roll onto your side to get up. Okay, so what that will do is just avoid aggravating it or increasing the separation, basically. So it's just something of interest. What I'd say is that postnatally, it does affect how you exercise, and it can affect it also antenatally. So some people are very aware of that, and they actually have quite a big gap antenatally. So if that were to be the case, and it can happen usually end of the second trimester, beginning of the third, when your bump is getting bigger, if you notice that you're getting like quite a significant coning of your abs, and therefore you've got reasonable abdominal separation, it can be helpful not to do things on all fours. Because if you're doing the classic like Superman exercise, opposite arm, opposite leg extensions in an all fours position, if you've got the weight of your bump basically pulling downwards and pushing onto the separation, it can make the separation bigger. So it's just worth thinking about things like that. If you are in a yoga class, for example, I would knock on the head. You can do seated stuff, that's absolutely fine. You can do side lying left, side lying right. What I do is, with side lying, I would prop, if people have like quite significant abdominal separation in pregnancy, I prop the bump up with a cushion, so this is not like pulling downwards, because it's just like going to put more strain through a weakened area. Postnatally, I always check everyone for abdominal separation, and this is actually important postnatally to do that, because it's going to basically dictate how you do and you don't exercise in terms of your abs. So actually postnatally, I would advocate everybody getting themselves checked. I do a kind of like a face, I don't know if you've ever seen it. I put it up on my Facebook page. I just put up like a post, and I say, next Monday I'm doing a drop-in clinic, and people just pop round to me. It's just free, and I check everyone's abs and I go through everything, because it gives everyone a tool to know how they should and shouldn't exercise. At the moment it's a little bit harder, because because to check you need to actually put your fingers on somebody, and I can't do that at the moment. But I have set up like a tiny little group on Facebook, and I put a video in there, and I need to do a follow-up video actually to explain to people what to, just to show people how you can check yourself. But basically, the long and short of it is that if you've got abdominal separation postnatally, I'm going to turn the screen down towards my abs area again. So if you can imagine, say effectively I'm unzipped, yeah. So I've got my top layer of abs is unzipped. Can you see that? Yeah. Now, if I have, you measure in how many fingers you can fit in the gap. So the zipped open area is the gap. It's like, can I fit one finger? Can I fit two? Can I fit three? Okay. Now, if you then feel what it feels like inside, does it feel very strong and toned, or does it feel really squishy, like you could lose your hand in there? Because that again is an indication of like what strength you have left in the deep layers of muscle. But if I'm just going to show you what happens if you head off and postnatally you have separation and you do sit-ups, okay? Because they're contraindicated with abdominal separation. Have a look at my top and see what happens if I do a sit-up. Can you see? Yeah? Can you see what's happening there? I mean, it's just a way of, it's hard to show on the screen, but what I'm trying to show to you is that basically a lot of abdominal exercises hit the six-pack, but if your six-pack is separated and you go and do the classic six-pack exercises, which are things like sit-ups and V-sits and planks and stuff, you're actually physically pushing it further apart. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. Hopefully you can see that with the zip. It literally pushes. So all that work, your body is trying to knit it all back together again, and then you could be going and doing exercises and basically undoing all the good work.
Okay, so it does eventually kind of naturally go back to normal. It's just giving it time, just like after labour it heals itself.
Yeah, it can. So with a lot of, I'd say that with a lot of people, so how many months are you postpartum now, Jade? Are you
19 months now?
19 months, yeah. So you could give yourself a go and check. But for a lot of people, it will like naturally, gradually realign, and it will kind of knit back together again. But doing the right exercises will definitely help. Doing the wrong exercises will definitely make it worse.
I've not exercised once since having her, so I don't think I've ruined it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so there we are. But with some people, they end up with like quite a problem, and it just is like a persistent gap there, and it's very soft inside and very kind of like lacking in tone and squidgy. And then what happens is they're like, initially they'll give birth and they're like, okay, well, I've got my mummy tummy because obviously I've been stretched. And then they start to do their exercise, and then they realize everything else goes back to normal, and then they're just left with this kind of like slight kind of like poochy. Like some people will contact me and they'll say, well, I feel like I look 5 months pregnant, but I'm not, and I get, or the worst is people going, well, I get asked when due. It's really awful for people. And what that can be is that the abdominals are really having a tough time getting back, knitting back together again. When that happens, you really have to work at it, and you have to know what you're doing. And it's called diastasis recti. So people can look it up, diastasis recti. I do a lot on that, by the way. That's the online postnatal program that I run is actually designed to close the abdominal separation. But so basically, then people have to really kind of consciously work at it and do little bits of exercise every day. And they also have to think about it in their daily lives. So not doing, because all the lifting and carrying that you're doing, if you're thinking, and then like we're holding babies on one side, on if you're right-handed, you tend to hold your baby on your left-hand side, and all of that has an impact on how you heal postnatally.
I do have a few questions, if it's all right, just to jump in on those.
Yeah, go for it.
So you said about getting checked. Can the doctor do that check-up, or is that just a specialist like yourself that would do it?
No. So basically, years ago, so I mean, just to give you an idea, I've got 3 boys and my youngest is 15. So 15 years ago, they did used to check. You'd get a reasonable check at your 6-week checkup, And also we used to have, it was actually run by the local midwives and the local health visitors, and it was called the New Mum Group. And we all used to go along, and we used to get this support. I actually used to go in as part of the NHS, and I would check all the mums there. So you had this support. But now, I mean, this has been going on for a long time, because the mums in my classes always tell me about it. They'll say, because I was saying, well, you mustn't start exercising postnatally until you've had your 6-week checkup and you've been given the green light. And then they all come to me and they go, oh, well, that wasn't very useful. I just went along and they just sort of said, how are you feeling? Are you feeling all right? Have you thought about contraception? Right, bye.
Yeah, literally, that's what happened to me.
Well, there you are. So in other words, every now and then I'll get someone who has a doctor that checks them, but it is massively the exception that confirms the rule. And the vast majority of women no longer get checked, which is why I brought in my free drop-in clinics, because I wanted to fill that gap. And I do them. Normal conditions, I do one once a month. And I get a lot of people actually turning up to them, because there's a real need for it out there. But I think I've got that, talking about, can your doctor check? There's something I want to mention, and I think it's an important point, which is that basically healthcare professionals, so whether it be your GPs, your midwives, your health visitors, they are, well, a GP is a general practitioner, so it's in the word, it's general, so they know a little bit about a lot. And health visitors and midwives know a lot about their fields, but none of those practitioners are trained specifically in exercise and in physical activity. They do not have any training in that. So a lot of people, and it's perfectly natural that when you're pregnant, you ask your healthcare professionals, can I do this exercise or can I do that exercise? And postnatally at the 6-week checkup, loads and loads of women will go to their 6-week checkup and go, can I run now? Can I go back to circuits? And one of the problems I've had now for a long time is that the healthcare professionals, although they don't know the answer, they don't know the correct answer to that question a lot of the time, they still answer it. Instead of saying, well, it's not my field. So, for example, because I work in fitness, which is an area of well-being, people are constantly asking me health questions. And I'm not a doctor. I have doctor title. I'm not a medical doctor. So I cannot answer medical questions. So if people ask me, I get it all the time, they'll be like, oh, my foot hurts, or whatever, or I've done this injury. I'm like, no, you either need to go to a physio or the doctor or whatever. And it's really important to understand those limits. So be careful when you go to your healthcare practitioners and ask them fitness-related questions, because you might well get an answer and you might well get the wrong answer. And a classic example is being told that you can run after your 6-week checkup. Don't do it. Don't do high impact running, whether even jogging, by the way, is a form of impact work. And if you go and do impact work too soon postnatally, and 6 weeks postpartum is way too soon, you will do damage to your, potentially to your joints and particularly to your pelvic floor. And honestly, if you do your pelvic floor in, you're going to regret that, because it's really hard to kind of sort it out.
I think that answers your question, does it, Danielle? Because she's asked if she can start exercising prior to her 6-week check, which will actually be at 8 weeks. Just because how the doctor's working at a minute. So I think that answers the question. So,
but I'll just add to that. You can, she's 8 weeks postpartum, you're 8 weeks postpartum, so you can definitely, I know that we've got the restrictions on, but I do, you can go out and do that daily walk. Absolutely, it's going to be good for, otherwise we're all going to go crackers, basically, if we don't go out. So definitely do that. You should be doing your pelvic floor exercise. The pelvic floor exercises are the number one exercise that you should start postnatally, and you can start them, the moment you give birth, if that happens to pop into your mind, which it won't. But that's how soon you can and should be doing them. You can't. Okay, so you're 8 weeks postpartum. If you've had a C-section, you need to wait longer. You need to wait 9 to 10 weeks before you exercise. If you were going to a class format, which you probably won't be doing at the moment, but if you were, then the instructor would need to have that green light where the GP said, yes, you're fine, off you go. But in a private sense, so you're at home now, and you're 8 weeks postpartum, if you're fine and you're feeling okay, you can start to do some really like gentle stuff. Yeah. Things like squats.
Alison's asked how she can lose that last stone after pregnancy, just to get rid of the baby pouch, basically, with the gyms not being open and things. What can she do at home? Is this where you'd recommend a class, or is there things she can do around a house? Or
yes, so, I mean, it's up to her whether, you know. Okay, so hang on, let's go back to the loss of the stone. The stone. Actually, the most effective way to get rid of that is going to be how you eat. Okay, so that is something that you can actually do. You don't have to go anywhere for that. You can do that, you know, from home. It doesn't require any intervention other than yours. I would really recommend using MyFitnessPal if you want to. And I'm not saying go on a diet. I don't believe that. But you could set yourself. I don't know if you're breastfeeding or not, but either way, you have to set yourself a calorie count that is reasonable for you, so you're not going to go. These like extreme things never work anyway. And you set your macros, so your carbs, your protein, and your fat. You know, you might want to tip more towards protein and fat and less towards carbs. It depends on how you are as well, your body, what it responds well to. But basically, the most effective way of losing that baby weight is going to be how you eat. And then the movement will help, and how you choose to move. You know, obviously you are restricted at the moment. I would definitely, because you're at home, if you're a class person, in other words, if you like doing stuff, you know, in a format, or if you like a structured session, then, you know, try a pregnancy, a postnatal class that's tailored. Yeah, so you can. Interval training is always very effective when it comes to like boosting the metabolism. So, but you'd want to be doing. I don't want you doing. I've not done the Joe Wicks, but I know that the Joe Wicks is a lot of like jumping around. So, bearing in mind what I said before, you don't want to be jumping around. Whereas if you did something that was specifically postnatal, it might still be interval training, which is effective, or it might be weight training, again, very effective for boosting the metabolism. But you want it to be low impact, no impact, preferably. Yeah. Otherwise, you can do, you know, your daily walk. You can put, if you've got any hills near you, pram plus hill. Speed up and down, you know, make it, if it don't run, but, you know, make it power walking. That's pretty effective. It becomes interval training. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't want to do any jumping after just having a baby, because
you really not. Don't do skipping. Don't. I know skipping rope is really convenient. Don't do trampolining. Don't jump onto your older kids' trampoline, please.
Going back to the pelvic floor exercises, Danielle's asked, will it help with prolapse? She's not been diagnosed, but I don't know if you can give more information on that, Danielle. But
okay, right. So, so there are different types of prolapse. Do you feel like you've got a prolapse? So, for example, you might, as the day progresses, so you might sort of feel okay when you get up in the morning, but then as the day progresses and you're kind of upright for a long time, you might get that sort of sensation of like heaviness and of dragging downwards, and that might be an indication of a prolapse, or you might even be able to feel it, in which case it might be a more significant prolapse. These are all basically you need a women's health physio, so it's not your standard physio. So you've got your general physios, and then you've got specialists. The specialist you need is a women's health physio. I can give you the details of one. She's actually they've set up online at the moment, so I'm sure she's actually in my my postnatal group as well. Where I do the fitness stuff. But ideally, you would want, this would have to be done face to face, by the way, afterwards. But you need to have an examination to check with the women's health physio if you have a prolapse, and if so, what grade it is. So basically they grade them. So 1 is basically very mild, and 2, 3, etc. And they say that if you have a mild prolapse, so say a 1, maybe 1, 2, you can potentially use exercise to reverse the prolapse. Big job, but you need to know how to do it. You need to be taught how to do those exercises properly. But it is feasible, and there are different ways of doing it. So you could look up, for example, this is called hypopressives. It comes from Spain and Latin America, and they use it in Spain, for example. They use it. All postnatal women use hypopressives. They're taught routinely by their own physio how to use hypopressives to strengthen the pelvic floor postnatally. So that's one way of doing it. It's not widespread in the UK, but it's massive over there, and that can reverse a low-grade prolapse. Also, as I say, there are pelvic floor exercises you can be taught how to do. There's also electrical stimulation, which can be used by a physio, but it has to be by a women's health physio. So there are various things that can be done. In terms of what you can do, you definitely check that you know how to do your pelvic floor exercises. I think a lot of us think that we kind of are doing our pelvic floor exercises correctly, and we might even be doing the opposite and bearing downwards. So it could actually potentially be unhelpful. And there are things like, for example, to be aware of, like your breath is really important. If you hold your breath when you're doing your pelvic floor exercises, you're actually creating more pressure through the prolapse, so it can make it worse. Things to think of, but also like when you're lifting and carrying your baby, the pram, etc. That's a lot of additional weight and pressure going through your pelvic floor. So it's important to prepare for these movements. It sounds crazy because when a baby's crying, we're not thinking about preparing our pelvic floor. But if you can try and breathe in, exhale, it's the exhaling which helps the pressure off the pelvic, lifting correctly. Yeah, there are lots and lots of things I could go. If you've got any like more specific questions on pelvic floor, just fire away to Jade, because I can go into more specific things, because it's a really big and really important topic. But a women's health physio, yeah.
She's just commented again saying my placenta got stuck and was pulled out quite dramatically, which I think has resulted in a mild prolapse. More info would be great. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So. In normal circumstances, as I say, my first port of call would be to go to a women's health physio. I can definitely put her in touch with the one because she has offered to offer advice, to the mums that I work with. So I'm sure she'd be willing to do that, even if it were just like a video. I think you need to gather information and gather correct information. What I would say a little bit is about not just simply doing your pelvic floor exercises every day, but it's about thinking about your whole day, because no matter how many pelvic floor exercises we do every day, it's a really small proportion of what we're doing throughout the day. So the importance of reducing internal pressure by breathing when you lift something heavy that's going to have more of an impact, because as a mum with a baby, we are constantly lifting a relatively heavy baby, yeah. And so trying to lift properly, reduce that internal pressure by breathing out on the lifting with correct technique, with the whole kind of like postural thing, good posture, all of these things. It's like a unit, basically. I mentioned abdominal separation before. Well, if you think about it, your torso, all of that area, it's a unit, and it only really functions well when everything is functioning properly. So the bits to think about are your diaphragm at the top. So if you think of it like a cylinder, yeah, you've got a diaphragm at the top, and every time you breathe in, the diaphragm pushes down, creates pressure. At the bottom, you've got your pelvic floor. When there's pressure inside, it pushes down on the pelvic floor. Do you see what I mean? And then you've got your abdominals round it. So it's like all these, it's like an integrated unit, and the whole thing needs to function properly. Okay, thank you. I'll get the details for you, Danielle, from Jo after this class.
Definitely, yeah.
Thank you. There's no more questions for now, so please continue.
Okay, well, I mean, I've kind of thrown some more. I did mention, so pelvic pain. Everyone okay with pelvic pains? I've not had any questions on that.
No.
Sometimes I get asked about carpal tunnel syndrome or sore wrists. That's quite common. From a fitness perspective, if you do have wrists that feel particularly sore and weak in pregnancy, I would avoid all four exercises where you're on all fours. Or if you are on all fours, you put your hands into a fist. So you put instead of going onto the palm of the hand, that's a really tough position for your wrist, yeah, because you're hyperextending. That is a nice position for your wrist, yeah. So you would go into an all fours position with your wrist in that position. So that's just something to bear in mind. If you get carpal tunnel and it's quite bad, some people have to sleep with splints, just because what they find is that at night, we sleep like that and we do things with our hands and it just really aggravates it. So the splint just enables everything to stay set and aligned, and it's kinder on the wrist. Abdominal separation we've covered. Pelvic floor, if far away, if there's anything more. I mean, basically pelvic floor wise, postnatally, you kind of need to do a pelvic floor check, which you can do yourself. So I would say just once, postnatally, just check that you can switch urine off in mid-flow. Okay, it's not something I want you to do regularly. I would do it once every 6 weeks. Okay, but just check that you can actually do that. If it doesn't respond immediately, then it means that your pelvic floor is weak. Okay, pelvic floor exercises. Give Jade a shout to let her know if you're aware that there are 2 types of pelvic floor exercises. Does that ring a bell, Jade, to you?
No, I'm literally clueless about all this. I'm learning so much.
Okay, well, you're learning something today. Okay, so pelvic floor exercises, by the way, we should do them in pregnancy as well.
Yeah, I didn't know that either.
Well, I think you've survived, so it's okay. Everyone does. But basically with pelvic floor exercises, you need to do 2 types of pelvic floor exercise. You need to do what's called long pelvic floor hold ups, yeah, where you pull up on your pelvic floor for a lot and hold. And then you need to do short ones where you kind of like pull up and then release, pull up, release. It's quite a short, sharp movement. And the reason we have to do that is because the pelvic floor, all our muscles in our body, you've got 2 main types of muscle fiber. You've got your slow twitch and your fast twitch. Okay, I mean, you don't need to know whether, but basically what this means is, if you can imagine at 2 ends of the fitness spectrum, you've got your marathon runner at one end, and so that's your Paula Radcliffes of this world, and you've got your sprinter at the other end. That's the Usain Bolts of this world, okay? And they have different types of muscle. So the Usain Bolt will have more fast twitch, like power. It's like your power muscles, and Paula Radcliffe has all the endurance muscle, yeah. And the pelvic floor has to do 2 jobs. It has an endurance job. It has a marathon job to do every day, and it has a power job to do every day. So basically, the marathon is that the moment you stand up out of your bed, in other words, the moment you're no longer horizontal, your pelvic floor is at the bottom. If you can imagine, your floor is effectively, this is a really horrible metaphor, but it's like the bottom of a shopping bag. Okay, it's holding in all your internal organs. So you've got the bottom of the shopping bag, you've got all your internal organs here. If the bottom of the shopping bag gives up, yeah, everything falls out. That's basically a prolapse. Now that's a really, really horrible metaphor, so I'm sorry, but it's just for you to understand that the moment you stand up in the morning, the bottom of the shopping bag has to work to keep everything inside and working, yeah, and it's going to be doing that all day, non-stop, until you go to bed and lie down at night. That's a marathon that your pelvic floor is doing, yeah. So you have to do long pelvic floor pull-ups for that, which is effectively, you take a breath in, go for it. So breath in, exhale, and as you exhale, you pull up on your pelvic floor and you hold. Yeah, and hold. Now, when you hold, don't hold your breath. You've got to breathe as well. Okay? And there will come a point when you do your pelvic floor pull-up where you're holding, and then you're like, oh, hang on a sec, it's getting really kind of weak and it's beginning to kind of waver and it wants to give up. You stop. That's the end. That's the end of your strength. What I teach people postnatally is that you figure out how long you can hold. So you've got to measure progress as the weeks and the months go by. So you test how long you can hold your pelvic floor pull up for. Okay, so you do your breath in, you exhale, pull up on your pelvic floor, time yourself, how many seconds? 1, 2, 3, okay, and then it kind of gives up on you, and you might go, okay, well, I could do 3 seconds. Okay, then you go, okay, so I can do my long pelvic floor pull up, that's the marathon runner one, yeah, is 3 seconds long. How many repetitions can I complete with the last repetition being as strong and as powerful as the first one? Okay, so then you check that. So you do your, breathe in, exhale, pull up, 1 and 2 and 3, release. Do it again, breath in, exhale, 1 and 2, 3. And you keep going. And it might be that you can do, I don't know, for argument's sake, you can do 6 lots of 3-second reps. You see what I mean? And that would be your baseline. That's your starting point. So that's your slow, that's your long hold ones. Then you've got the sprinter ones. So your sprinter pelvic floor muscle fibers are there for a different job. They're there for shocks to the pelvic floor. Jade, can you think of any shocks to your pelvic floor? Okay, I'll give you an example.
Like, oh.
I'll give you an example. A cough or a sneeze. Like if you have a massive coughing fit, yeah, that's a big shock to your pelvic floor. If you sneeze, that's a really big shock to your pelvic floor. Laughing, actually, sometimes, if you've got a prolapse, you might feel that through your pelvic floor when you laugh. Jogging, running, jumping, all of those things. If you think about jogging, every step you take is basically a shock to your pelvic floor. Yeah. So that's the sprinter. So when you do your big sneeze, your pelvic floor has to go into action and it has to stop you from wetting yourself. And it can only do that. It's charming, isn't it? It has to react really, really fast and really, really strongly. Okay. To train that side of the muscles, we do short, strong pull-ups. So it's the same principle. We go breath in, exhale, pull up, release. Pull up, release. And it's just like a short, sharp pull up and down, up, let go, up, let go. And then you figure out how many reps you can do of the strong pull-ups, and you want the last pull-up to be as strong as the first one. So you might find you can do, 7 of those. So then you'd know that you start off, postnatal, you'd be starting off and you'd be doing your long pull-ups 3 seconds 5 times, and your short pull-ups 7 times, for example. And then you recheck 6-8 weeks later, and you might have improved. You should have improved if you're doing them frequently, every day. Yeah, 2-3 times a day, every day. Check again, and you might find that you can hold for 4 seconds or for 5 seconds. Yeah, and that's how you measure progress, and that's how you build your pelvic floor. That's part of building your pelvic floor strength up.
Okay, that's quite interesting to learn, actually. But, yeah, thank you for that. Was there any other topics that you wanted to cover?
That's probably. I kind of mentioned to you about birthing balls because I do find that everybody goes, I'm pregnant, I'm not my birthing ball, and then they get this ball, they pump it up, which is really hard work, and then it sits there, and they're like, okay, what do I do with it now? And there are lots of things that you can do. You can use it for your core stability work in pregnancy. So even something, so for example, I mentioned the low squashy sofa that's really bad for your lower back. If you've got a birthing ball, by the way, I'll talk you through getting the right size birthing ball for you. But you could use, instead of sitting on that low squashy sofa, which is going to make your lower back hurt, I would suggest sitting on a birthing ball for watching TV and stuff, any length of be sitting more on a birthing ball, but only if you've got the right size birthing ball. How do you know? When you pump it up and sit on it, it should be nice and firm, and your hips should be above your knees. You don't want to have, if those are your knees, you don't want to have your knees and those are your hips. You don't want to have them parallel. You definitely don't want to have your hips down. You want to have the knees down and the hips up. That's the optimal position for getting your baby into the right position, and it's the optimal position also for your lower back, and it will take the strain off your lower back. So that's important to make sure. Don't get most people, a 55 centimeter birthing ball will be the wrong height. 65 centimeters is okay for a lot of people, and 75. If you're kind of, I'm 5'9". If you're taller than 5'9", I'd start going into the 75 centimeter fit ball. And also, you get what you pay for. Okay, so if you buy like the world's best value, in inverted commas, cheapest fit ball out there, the likelihood is it will be really kind of like soft and squashy, and you'll sink down into it, and you'll end up with your knees above your hips, and it'll just hurt your back. So actually, in this instance, I say it's better to buy something more expensive and good quality. And there's lots of, and then once you've got the right fit ball, there's a lot that you can do, but it's very, very nice in pregnancy, particularly late pregnancy. You know, when you get the lower back tightness, everything feels tight, and you can do like rocking movements with your hips, you can do pelvic tilts, you can do rotations, all of that can be used also actually in early stages of labor. And then earlier on in pregnancy, you can do quite a lot of core stability. So you can do some of your upper body exercises. You can do single leg raises for balance. There's all sorts that you can do. And they're also really good postnatally. So they have they're a really good way of building things up in a safe way postnatally, just so long as you know what you're doing. But yeah, they're quite handy. Yeah.
I didn't know you could use them postnatally. As soon as I give them birth,
absolutely, yeah. You can make it as easy or as tough. So you can start off doing really, really gentle stuff like you were doing in pregnancy, and then a fit ball can be like super, super hard. You can do really, really tough stuff on it. Yeah, that's quite good.
I didn't do anything other than literally sit on it and watch TV. And my other half had lots of fun on it, bouncing on it as well. But apart from that, I was like, I don't know what to do with it. So
yeah,
it's good to
and then when the kids get bigger, they start to roll over the top of it, and that's when you have to like hide it in the loft. So it becomes a health hazard.
Giant ball game.
Yes, I had all of that.
I don't know if you want to mention the classes that you're running as well, because you're doing a pay what you can afford, aren't you?
Yeah. So I mean, I've had online fitness for years. It launched in 2016. So it's like a pregnancy and postnatal. It's like a complete week by week program. So it takes you, so for example, if you're 18 weeks into your pregnancy, then you'll be on week 18 of the program. And it takes you right the way through your pregnancy, and then postnatally, you kind of flip the system over into the postnatal, and it builds you up from week one. So a lot of the stuff in the early weeks, a lot of the stuff that I've covered here today, I discuss in detail in those early weeks. So about like getting the abs to kind of wake up again, the pelvic floor, all of that kind of stuff. And then it gradually builds you up for 6 months postpartum. And I focus a lot on abdominal separation, and it brings in also cardio and resistance at the right time. So it's a really useful program. But normally it's it has a certain price attached to it. But what I've done at the moment is just basically said it's open to anybody, regardless of your finances. If you can't pay anything, that's absolutely fine by me. If you can pay a little bit, that's great. If you want to pay the full price and that's lovely. Some people paying over the odds to subsidize those who can't pay anything. So it's just trying to kind of like make sure that everybody can follow a program that is, I think, what's good about it is that it's designed specifically for the weeks that you are in. It's not a one size fits all. It is literally every week is tailored for that week that you're in.
Yeah, that sounds great. So again, I'll pop the link in the comments when this video ends, just in case anyone's interested in that.
Of course, yeah, thank you.
But yeah, thank you for that. That's been helpful for me, and I'm not even pregnant, so I've learned a lot. Hopefully other people have, and I know a lot will watch this back later, so you might get a few more questions pop up later on that I'm sure you'll be happy to answer. But
just because I'm really rubbish, I'm really rubbish with technical stuff. So how will I see the questions? Will they appear? How will I get them?
Yeah, so when I end this video, I'm still going to be in a chat with you. So I'll explain all the technical stuff to you then, just so I don't bore everyone else with it. But I'll talk to you
right. Now I've just told the whole world that I'm really bad at technical stuff.
Don't worry, it's fine. But yeah, thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you, Jo, for your time and explaining all this. Hopefully it's been helpful. And we'll see you again tomorrow, everyone. Bye.
Bye, Jane.